just on Monday, there was a, what? Monday, there was above the fold, there was a smoggy picture of Beijing, raising the question about whether or not the air will be clean enough in time for the Olympics. And some of you in the room were here a few weeks ago. We did have a meeting on Beijing's Green Olympics, and we were not focused on headlines in terms of like the gloom and doom angle, but focused more instead on longer lasting impacts from the kinds of investment and policy changes that came around it. And during that meeting, I was asked several times, they were saying, well, will the air be clean? And I said, well, it's a good question. I think that, that we'll be pondering that for a few months, but wait and see. Today, we have a different kind of meeting, and I think in some ways maybe a little bit more positive in focusing on a theme that the China Environment Forum has pursued for much of its 8 years, looking at non-governmental organizations in China. And today we've got two folks from two U.S. green groups, and they are unique groups, not only for the potential quirkiness of the people who run them, but actually they're unique in that they're focused in working a lot at the grassroots, as the title of the talk implies, bottom-up greening. And what's also, I think, striking about these two groups, Pacific Environment and the Mountain Institute, is that both of them, they really have, I think, staying power in China. Pacific Environment has been there for about 8 years, and the Mountain Institute, well, you've been there. Chris Ledoux has been there for 10 years under the Mountain Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, so the Mountain Institute has been there a decade.
You've been there about since 1988.
1988. That's longer than, oh, you've been there.
No, I've been there 10 years.
Okay, so the Mountain Institute, okay, I take that back. The Mountain Institute has been there since 1988, long time. But they're very quietly working in the outback of the Tibetan Autonomous Region of China. And so Chris is going to be talking about their work in Tibetan regions, very much working at the grassroots, focus also on development type work, I think also some energy things as well. And then Daniela Salaverry is going to talk about her work most recently, how the Pacific Environment has focused on supporting grassroots groups focused on water pollution, which, as I noted, the headline of the Post last week of Lake Tai was one area where they've worked in the past. So I'm going to just turn it on over to you guys. Okay? Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, everybody, for coming out and listening to an interesting angle of China's sort of environmental situation, like Jennifer said, looking at things from the bottom-up approach. My name is Daniela Salaverry, and I run the China program at Pacific Environment, which is a San Francisco-based environmental nonprofit organization. We believe that local people know best how to protect their local environment, and in order to support the development of effective environmental movements, not only in China but in the North Pacific Rim, Pacific Environment provides funding and capacity building support to community-based environmental organizations. As you all know, this is critically important in an area of China, or the entire country of China, given the environmental degradation that's come as a result of, over 2 decades of rapid economic and industrial growth. In response to that growth and in response to the environmental troubles that have come about, there has been a very positive environmental movement blooming for the past 15 years, and Pacific Environment's work in China is dedicated to supporting that movement. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about Pacific Environment's approach in China, introduce some of the local community leaders that we're working with, and then have opportunity for questions and answers later after Chris's presentation. So of course, if you're sitting in this room and you've been involved with Jennifer and the different programs that she's done here over the years, you know that China's environmental problems are nothing new. And over a decade ago, in 1994, recognizing this, the Chinese government allowed for social organizations, non-governmental groups, to register and officially operate within sort of the social structures of China. And this has proved incredibly effective. There have been thousands of environmental organizations that have come across the entire country, even in Beijing, where it's sort of the center and the seat of the environmental movement. There's said to be over 200 NGOs, which is amazing. If you can imagine, a city of 13 million having 200 environmental NGOs working on every sort of issue, you can imagine that there's a lot of great work happening, not just in Beijing, but around the country. The movement is really diverse, and it's not just in Beijing, but it's, Chris is going to talk later about Tibet, and it's in Xinjiang, and it's in the north and the south, working on every type of issue. I'm going to speak specifically about water pollution, but you have groups that are working on health issues. You have groups working on air pollution, endangered species protection, wildlife habitat protection. So across the board, you have groups that are, dedicated to working on any environmental issue you can imagine. It's much like here in the U.S. And the movement is diverse. These pictures here show a lot of young people, but it's not just students who are involved in the environmental movement in China anymore. It's scientists, it's community leaders who are just dedicated to working as local advocates for environmental protection. It is students, it's young people through education programs. So the movement is increasingly becoming more diverse. So like I said, our Pacific Environments approach is supporting these community-based organizations through a series of different tools. The first and most fundamental of those tools is funding. We provide a third of our programmatic budget directly to community-based groups. Last year that was $50,000, and this year it's over $100,000. And that money can go a long way in China, especially for community-based groups that are operating in provincial capitals and small cities where $10,000 a year is enabling them to hire staff, pay the rent, pay the utilities, and really have the operating costs that they need to exist as a functioning organization. In addition to the funding, which is very fundamental for these groups, we also offer technical assistance. My colleague Wen Bo and I are in regular communication with these groups. I'm on email with them on a daily basis. Wen Bo is on the phone on a daily basis, communicating with them on what their local needs are. If they need help developing a budget, then we will help them develop that budget. If they need help organizing a media workshop, we will help them organize that media workshop. Our approach is to support what they need locally. So this is a map of China, and it shows who we work with and where they're located. As you can see, we're located with partners across the country. The movement is wide, but as I mentioned earlier, it's certainly concentrated in Beijing. And we want to encourage the development of environmental groups across the country so that the movement can sort of distribute the experience and distribute the effectiveness. And so we've strategically made the decision to support groups not only in Beijing, but around the country. Currently, we're working with a dozen community-based groups, providing them, again, with small grants and capacity-building tools to make their work more effective. Another thing I should say briefly about our approach in working with our partners is while in Beijing you have organizations that have existed for 10 or 15 years, very professional, sophisticated groups, many of these groups that are in existence around China are volunteer-run. They're not as well established. They don't necessarily have staff. And so one of Pacific Environment's approaches as part of our capacity building and grant making to these groups in China is to enable them to become professional groups, to enable them to hire a staff person who can stay on board for 1 or 2 years and really help that organization establish itself as a community resource, as a reputable NGO, and having that well-established presence in their community will ultimately make them more effective. They'll be able to have strong working relationships with local businesses and local governments, and sort of be this valuable voice for community members who might not otherwise feel like they have a mechanism to voice their environmental concerns or have an understanding of what's happening within their local environment. So like Jennifer said, I'm going to talk a little bit about water pollution, which is the area where Pacific Environment is supporting the dozen groups that we work with. So like I said, the issues are really broad. People are working on every type of environmental challenge you can imagine, but one very pressing issue is water pollution, and that's where we've decided to focus our efforts in supporting our partners. This map now is a little bit outdated. It's from 2003, but I think it's really very indicative of the water pollution problem in China. This shows the 7 major river systems in China and the river quality. And basically, anywhere on this map that's red or yellow is a river quality grade 3 or worse, which means that that water can't be used for drinking. And as we've heard a lot in the press over the past couple of years following what happened on the Songhua River in 2005, major pollution incidents happen in China on these waterways every other day. This is a pretty staggering statistic when you're thinking that over 1 billion people are dependent on these water resources. And I think that this map, while it sort of shows where the major river basins are, you don't recognize that actually the water distribution in China is also very unbalanced. You have a very water-heavy south and water-poor north. And so not only do you have water pollution as a problem, but you also are starting to have water scarcity as an increasing concern for people living in the north, especially in the area of Gansu and that region where the Yellow River is increasingly running with lower volumes of water. So this is where there is an opportunity. Many environmental groups have decided that they can use sort of heightened awareness around water pollution and environmental issues in general in China as an opportunity to educate, their communities and educate students on the importance of environmental protection and the importance of water conservation and general environmental education. Beyond that, though, they can also act as a voice for what the community needs. For example, if there's a community, a fishing community that is dependent on the health of a river ecosystem for its livelihood, and that river ecosystem has, slowly started to fail, having a strong community group that can act as a voice for that community's needs will empower, for example, that fishing community to, get out there and talk about their concerns. Their livelihood has been impacted by the decreased fishing resources and so on and so forth, and so that's another role that these groups play. And finally, some of these groups are working in conjunction with Ma Jun in Beijing, who has a map of China, who's tracking, basically he's taken government issued data on various pollutants in the waterways, and he's working with some grassroots groups to track the location of factories that are putting various toxins into the water. And so that's another way that these groups are getting involved in educating and monitoring and voicing community concerns around water quality. Oh, the characters didn't come up, sorry. That says Luman Jianghuai. This is a group called Green Anhui. They are based in Hefei, but they have several programs throughout the province. And I'm going to introduce 3 of the groups that we work with and talk a little bit about their approaches. So that fishing community that I just mentioned earlier was not only an example, but actually a real-life story where Green Anhui works. Here is a picture of boats on the Huai River where people live and fish, and this is their home. And Green Anhui has started a program where they're getting out and establishing themselves as a sort of local resource for those rural communities that might not know, what pollutants are in the water or what sort of mechanisms are being taken for environmental protection of those waterways. And so Green Anhui gets out on the river and has literally walked, I'd say, over 500 kilometers of the Huai River in Anhui province, getting out there and talking to people about their work and about, the importance of environmental protection. And this is an especially interesting example because they've been able to have a very strong impact locally. Last year, just sort of specifically, there was an incident where hundreds of thousands of batteries were dumped illegally, maybe not exactly in this spot where the picture is, but in this area right on the riverbanks. And because Green Anhui had been out to these communities and, established themselves, given contact information, and built a rapport with these local communities, the communities immediately called Green Anhui for some sort of help. They woke up in the morning and literally just hundreds of thousands of batteries were there in their backyards. And Green Anhui has a very extensive media network. They organize media workshops where they're bringing together, kind of in a room like this, 30, 50 journalists and educating them on various regional environmental issues and the work that they're doing. So Green Anhui called its media network put out a press release, so to speak, and the local radio station was on the scene within a couple of hours, and that sort of heightened awareness and heightened public attention to this issue resulted in, the local EPB getting on the scene and helping make sure that those batteries were properly removed and stored, and stage a cleanup. And so I think that although that's it's a small example, that is still an example of success. And it shows the value that these community-based groups can have, because, this is certainly not an isolated incident. Another group that we work with is called Green Camel Bell, and they are based in Lanzhou. And they are, you can see, there's a picture here of this person, and he's not more than 25 years old, but he is fully running this organization as a volunteer. This group operates out of Lanzhou, but has done a lot of work in the rural areas of Gansu, educating the communities there about the importance of water conservation. So not just water pollution, but how do you manage when you have a certain amount of water to work with this week or this month or this year, because this area is basically a desert. The picture on the right-hand side of the screen was not taken in Gansu. I should just say that this is the picture on the left shows better what the region looks like. So this is a unique approach where they're traveling 3 hours from the city center to a community where when I went there I felt like I had gone back in time in China, and they have done an amazing work developing a curriculum for schools in this area, particularly based on this region's sort of geographical limitations and water issues. And they've developed a curriculum that they put into practice last year as an education program in schools, and it was so successful that the local government actually asked them to take that curriculum beyond just the classroom and get it out into the community and take that information, so it had more of an impact beyond just primary school students. And so this is a really exciting example of how their positive role is being felt across the community. It's not just students, but it's the government and it's the community at large. This is another group. This is called Green Hanjiang, and they're located in Xiangfan in Hubei province. And this group is a little bit different. The two previous groups I introduced, they're younger. They're led by staff who have just completely dedicated their post-college careers to getting involved in the environmental movement. And this group is run by volunteer retired citizens. So they've had their careers and they've now decided they want to give something back. And they are very active. They work in a smaller city where they have an outreach program that is beyond what you can imagine. They are on the TV regularly. They are on the news. They are in the papers, and people know them. I was with them, and on the streets, we were stopped every day by local people who just wanted to talk about their environmental concerns. They recognize them from the TV and say, "Thank you so much for your great work. Can I talk to you about this problem or this thing that's come up in my community?" And so they're very prevalent within the area where they're working, and they aren't afraid to talk to people, which I think is really important, to educate people locally that they exist, that they have information. They have a newsletter that's basically much like Jennifer's China Environment Series publication. It's thick and it's full of articles and information, and they take that and they bring it to rural areas and urban areas, and so they're really educating people on the environmental situation and opportunities for improvement and so on. This picture is really interesting. I wanted to highlight this. You can see this woman is on the phone, and actually she and I were walking along the urban section of the Han River in Xiangfan, and she noticed an area where there was a big sort of wastewater dumping point right into the river. And she said, wait a second, I was here a few weeks ago and this was clean, what's going on? And we went back to the office and she picked up the phone and she called her friends at the Environmental Protection Bureau, which she has a very good working relationship with. And, she explained the situation and they explained the situation back to her, which was that they were closing that pipe, but they just needed to flush it out. And I think I put this picture in here to show that there is really strong working relationships with some of these NGOs with respect to the local government. And I think that that's an important example to highlight for many of these NGOs to recognize the opportunity in communicating and collaborating with local government and local businesses to make their voices stronger. And so I wanted to just sort of highlight that example that this is happening with many of these groups, and especially Green Hanjiang. So I'm not sure how much more time I have.
Take a couple more minutes.
Keep going, okay.
Not too long.
Not too long, okay.
There's going to be a lot of questions.
Sure, and I just want to say that I'm only here highlighting the 3 of the dozen groups that we work with, and that dozen groups is a small part of the larger environmental movement within China. And there's a lot of opportunity for supporting that movement, and I think that by being here and just getting a better understanding of what's happening locally within China is the first step to that. I've been in New York and DC this past 2 weeks and talking with a lot of people about the environmental situation in China, and I think that it's important to recognize that there's a lot of really positive work that's happening on the ground and across China, and I'm just pleased that everybody's taken the time to hear more about our work. I would encourage you to take a look at our website, which is pacificenvironment.org, and pick up some of the literature that I brought that highlights, again, some more of our partners and the situation and the great work that they're doing. And I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll have questions in a little bit.
Good. Let's thank her a moment. We'll hold off questions right now, but I should mention that a number of you have heard Wen Bo when he's come here and spoken, and that Pacific Environment has also supported groups that do work on marine issues, animals. So they actually have what I love about their website. I love any website that gives me information because I'm just an information hound here. But they support a lot of groups more broadly, and I think something too that over the years that when I first started here 8 years ago and I was getting to know some of the grassroots greenies in China, and I'd meet people in DC and they'd say China does not have NGOs, and I'm like, well, yeah, they do. They just don't necessarily have fancy name cards with logos, we can debate if you want, whether or not some people question whether or not there is a movement, which we could talk about. But I think that the sheer numbers and again, the local impact, I think, is something important, and this is really creating a kind of foundation that China needs. Top down can only go so far. Have I done enough chattering to get you all organized with the technology there, Chris? Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to let Chris start and moving us further west into China.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Ledoux. I'm the co-director of the Asia program for the Mountain Institute, the director of our enterprise development program, and the country director for China. And I'd like to thank Jennifer for inviting me here. I've been a long-time admirer of the China Environmental Forum, and it's a real pleasure to be up here sitting next to Daniela. And seeing how her career's developed over the years, it's really been inspirational, actually, and moving to see her making a difference and, as Mahatma Gandhi said, trying to be the change that she wants to see in the world. I'll just move into my presentation. Just a little bit, Jennifer asked me to talk briefly about the Mountain Institute, our history in China, how we've sort of evolved to where we are, and how we work with enterprise, communities, conservation, culture. And so I'll try and do my best to weave all that together in 20 minutes while keeping you somewhat interested. As you can see, the Mountain Institute, we've been around quite a while, and we're the only organization that's committed to working with mountains on a global scale. Our commitment to mountain people, mountain environments, and mountain cultures isn't a one-off commitment. We look to build long-term relationships in the communities that we work. and be a part of helping these communities take the best of their past to position them to move into a future that they feel comfortable creating and excited about moving into. Our program in China has been there since 1988. We have program offices in Beijing, Chengdu, and Shangri-La. And I'll just stop there on Shangri-La because it brings up something that occurred to me a couple months ago when we were doing some training meetings. And that is that, so many people in the world are searching for Shangri-La and searching for that Shangri-La in our life. And I think even the presentation yesterday is sort of an echo of Shangri-La and looking for that space in our lives. And we all hope for that place of sort of peace and understanding where we'll kind of have the answers revealed to the questions that we seek in life and find the joy that sometimes eludes us in the hectic pace of daily life. But that search for Shangri-La is often one that's an individual pursuit. But it made me think that we work in Shangri-La. So what about when Shangri-La needs to find its way into the world? What about when a Shangri-La needs assistance in understanding how to reach the people and come to terms with its own future? And that's the kind of work that we do, is trying to help these communities, these Shangri-Las in these mountain areas, find the path to the world and find a path to take who they are and survive environmentally, economically, and culturally. Our projects that we've been there since 1988. We've been in China quite a long time, and it's been a wonderful experience, I think, for our organization. It's been a challenging one. I think that our organization, like a lot of individuals, in their personal relationships, have a hard time leaving a relationship. So sometimes for some people it's easy to just, I think, break up and move on to the next love. But for us, we really hold to those relationships and hold the course and hope to really have that long-term benefit. The projects that we've completed so far in China, the first one was the Chomolungma Conservation Program, where we were a key partner in helping the Chinese government and the Tibet Autonomous Region government, in partnership with the Royal Government of the Netherlands, establish the Mount Everest Nature Preserve, which is about the size of Switzerland. I'll talk more about that later. And the second was the Peak Enterprise Pilot Project, which has now become a division of the Mountain Institute, and it's still in its sort of nascent stage. The current projects we have ongoing in China are the P2P, Pasture Lands to Profits, and the Plateau Development Project. The Chomolungma Conservation Program, as you can see, its mission, looking to really integrate conservation, economic development, and cultural preservation, along with building the capacity of the Chomolungma Conservation Natural Park to Nature Preserve to just improve the quality of its management and work with local communities. A lot of the areas that we work are not areas, they're areas that are protected in some cases or fragile, but that have communities within them. So how to bring these elements together. That cooperation was between, our agreement was with the Royal Netherlands government, and it existed under an umbrella agreement between the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Trade and Economic Cooperation and the Dutch government. The other program was a learning laboratory for economic development, and that's what I was originally responsible for when I found my way and heart to the Mountain Institute. I've been now with the Mountain Institute, I guess, approaching 10 years, and I spent more than 6 years living in Tibet, and now the rest of my time has been spent working with our other programs in Yunnan and Sichuan. But this was something innovative, a learning laboratory to bring economic development, enterprise development, to build in new techniques, to try different things. And we thought that this particular area of the world was as challenging as it could get. So if it worked there, it would work anywhere. So there were a number of goals that we had there, as you can see, and I won't read them because it always just tortures people when you read off your slides.
But these slides will be online, so you can look at them later.
And you can refer to them. Here are our current program sites in China, working in the Deqin Autonomous Prefecture in northwest Yunnan, and in the Aba Autonomous Prefecture in northern Sichuan. This is basically our program philosophy, and we try and bring these three elements together. This is really at the heart and core of everything the Mountain Institute does, is to try and integrate these three things in all our efforts, and to not be skewed, but it's really like going for the brass ring, to try, because oftentimes these various components are at odds, and that's where our creativity is called upon, and our commitment to keep getting up and wrestling with these issues. And I think very much like my other colleagues, and I'm sure many of you here today, like Bernard Shaw said, there's nothing greater than being used by a cause recognized by yourself as a mighty one, to be a force of nature instead of a selfish, feverish cloud of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. And so,
Can you say that in Tibetan, too?
I'd have to think about it.
Just so the people in the back of the room can see, the three elements are cultural preservation, enterprise development, and environmental conservation. I saw a few people squinting back there.
So, that's it, to really live and to work powerfully, to try and inspire ourselves, our staff, the communities that we work with, to be a part of something worthy in the world. And I think that's really a part of who the Mountain Institute is, and why they have my deep affection and my continued desire to remain working with them, is the heart of the Mountain Institute. But along with heart, you also, like it said, that, you can't have both your feet firmly planted in the air. So, you need to have a real strategy for the work that you're going to do. And this is really the framework that we use in approaching the work that we do. It's something I adapted from some various rural analysis, livelihood analysis models. You might be familiar with some of the layout in this, depending on how compulsive you are about reading development literature. But we take a asset-based approach to livelihood platforms, so looking at natural capital, physical, human, financial, and social, and how that's modified by social relations, institutions, organizations, in the context of trends such as population, migration, and so forth, and shocks. A lot of the areas we work are rural areas. These people are highly dependent on the environment, and so it's important to consider snowstorms and droughts. And in that context is where these communities that we work with develop their livelihood strategies. And they are composed of generally natural resource-based activities and non-natural resource-based activities, with effects on their cultural livelihood and environmental sustainability. So we basically just here try to begin our data collection from this point, and then our activities here with trying to create impacts from livelihood strategies, and then have an overall benefit in terms of hoping to improve the platform, the asset base of the areas that we work. This is our results framework for our China program. So strengthening mountain communities' capacity to meet their socioeconomic needs while conserving the environment and preserving their cultural heritage. I won't read each of these because they're kind of long, and once again, that would hurt for you guys to sit there and listen. But basically, our program is divided into two main categories. That is our core program and our sub-grant program. Our core program, roughly on a yearly basis right now, is about $1 million US. of which approximately $350,000 a year is allocated towards sub-grant program activities, of which we focus on expanding access to education and healthcare services, and improving environmental conservation through community-based conservation programs. Another sub-grant component is we look to preserve local cultural heritage sites, restore various historic places, monasteries, places that are meaningful to the local communities that they've identified in their community-based cultural heritage planning, and so forth. Our general approach in looking at, I thought this is where I'd integrate how we work from a business perspective, which is a little bit different than a lot of environmental organizations. And we don't necessarily see ourselves just as a conservation organization. We really see ourselves as an organization that brings those three areas together. Our primary method for looking at what we think is the best way to make impacts in the areas that we work is using a value chain criteria. I hope you don't mind, but it just seemed like a nice way of illustrating a value chain to have a line of stupas. A chain of stupas, trying to just say that I guess what I'm trying to say with this picture is we're looking to take a more enlightened perspective to economic development. The criteria that we look at we look for market demand. We look for demand-driven solutions, and also looking to see the kind of impacts that mountain people who can receive benefit. The other criteria, filters that we apply through the process are we want to have a positive impact on the environment. We look for favorable government policies to position ourselves accordingly, leverage the opportunities and position ourselves as strategically as possible. And we have a commitment to mountain women. So we want to involve women and look to see where we can make a difference in their lives. In a value chain process, basically it goes through these 5 steps where you can just review that. But we go through analyzing the constraints and looking for commercially viable solutions. And this whole process is very interactive, and it involves working with the businesses and not like, I guess the key point of this process is that we don't go in and tell people what they need to do. And when we're working with businesses and looking at the entrepreneurs or different private sector groups that make up some of these value chains and reach the mountain communities that we work with, we don't assume that we know what they need to do and we tell them what to do. We assume that they have the information that they need, and that we want to work with them to better understand that. And we do that through spending time with them and bringing them together at various stages to have focus group discussions and confirm the constraints and solutions. And in so doing, we really believe in cost share strategies. So when we work with entrepreneurs, businesses, and local communities, one of the ways that we understand if an intervention is really something that the community wants or the business wants is we ask them to pay for it, pay for part of it. And if they're not willing to pay for it, usually that leads us to the thing that they really want. So this has been really helpful for us. In Yunnan, for our Yunnan program, this kind of lets you know how we analyzed about 19, for our current China program, 19 value chains in 2 provinces. And this is kind of how we take the first screen of looking at what we're doing. And you could see here that in Yunnan, village-based tourism really looked like quite a good activity, as well as on the handicraft side, black clay pottery, which is another thing that's really fascinating. The small Nishi village, it has a 2,000-year-old pottery tradition. We're trying to really keep that going forward, and it's been exciting for us. In Sichuan, you can see that yak dairy, or the yak value chain, was really the one that had the most benefits. And so we really try and look at that, look from the market side, and then also look from the community side up. So we try and work from both sides at the same time. So there's the value chain side, which kind of looks at from the market, but then how do you really balance that with looking from the community. For us, like our TMI's kind of flagship approach that we've developed over the years is called APA, Appreciative Planning and Participatory Action. And it really integrates appreciative inquiry. For some of you who know or don't know, appreciative inquiry is just looking for the good in other people and inquiring in a way that values their strengths and what they bring to the table with participatory role appraisal and some other tools. And so we go through a 4D cycle. The first stage with the community, we hold workshops, is discover what are their strengths, what do they have, what successes have they accomplished, what's good about them, what are they doing, what do they like, what's their dream, where do they want to go, and then we work with them to design where they want to go, and then the next D is just do. So it's pretty simple, feel good kind of methodology that I found to be incredibly effective, actually. Not just working with local communities, but also working with government officials, different partners, and it really gets to what people want and where they want to go, and it helps us confirm that we're not making just discongruent hypotheses based on like our own sort of skewed kind of outside perspective about the local situation, or falling into this kind of trap of the kind of noble savage where we want to maintain or keep them and shrink wrap them or put them in a little kind of snow globe and not let them change or have a future they want. Our program in Sichuan is in Hongyuan County, and our primary partners, you can see, and our main activities there are yak dairy, yak value chain, rangeland conservation, Tibetan nomadic and agro-pastoralist cultural preservation, and then sub-grants. I read a little bit from that slide, forgive me. But you can see some of the different composition of this area that we're working. It's one of the greatest grassland areas in China right now, and we try and create and work with the different stakeholders. We have a tripartite agreement with the governments out there and the Canadian Agricultural Cooperation, and this hopefully will be designated a national model site, which is on its way, and we try and come up with replicable models that are appropriate, that are successful, so that we can then expand and move to other areas. And our rangeland co-management approaches have been really effective, and primarily because of the genius of Dr. Wilkes and his commitment to the local people. And but you can kind of get a look at, you know, the I don't know, it's a beautiful area. In Yunnan, Shangri-La County, Dothan Autonomous Prefecture, and there we're looking at village-based cultural heritage, ecotourism, handicraft development, also rangeland co-management, cultural heritage site restoration, and the same types of sub-grants. Now, for the sub-grantees, we really try and provide a suite of services for them. And we work with providing sub-grants to U.S. NGOs and then also to local organizations. The local organizations we try and also design training packages for to help build their capacity to be more effective in terms of program development, management, finance, fundraising. And I'll give you an example, like just personal example. When I worked in the TAR, my direct counterpart at the Federation of Industry and Commerce was in his late 50s when he decided to learn how to drive. And so I drove everywhere with him in the passenger seat, strapped in, as he would lean to take the turns and lurch around these mountain cliffs, and was only able to go like pretty much one speed, 50 kilometers per hour, whether it was the most dangerous pass or like a highway. And I think that's been TMI's approach to capacity building. We buckle up next to our partners, and we're in there with them through the whole thing. And I think that's been one of the reasons why we've been able to have staying power. And this is one of the questions that Jennifer put to me. Why do we have staying power? Because we're in till the end. We've strapped ourselves in, you know, like
going over
just
the mountains.
with them, leap and the net will appear. We're, you know, leaping with them. What lessons have I learned? I thought this might be something to just share with everybody about, you know, after being in China and working in these sensitive areas for so long, what might be something that, you know, I could share with you that you could take with you maybe if you haven't learned already. One is always begin and end with professionalism. In Chinese, they would say, 重视表示你的素质. So, you know, always demonstrate your worth and your value, that, you know, that you have merit, that you're a gentleman and gentlewoman, and a person of quality in the work that you do. And that's incredibly, I think, important in terms of just having long-lasting relationships in China, which are really going to make or break your program. And so, you know, with that, like, to just not look for that immediate result, to just be patient, and to understand that some things take time, and to, you know, to not sweat the small stuff, basically. And say, you know, to be more kwanrong, you know. The other is to have and so when you also end, even if it's not maybe on the terms that you would have desired, ending a program sometimes, to really look to the friendship, to recount the history of the good things that you've done together, and to end your cooperations very well, very respectfully, very friendly. And I think that my experience in working with China is that is never forgotten. Mm-hmm. You might not always get what you want, but people never forget that you treated them with quality and respect. And in the end, they will come back to help you if they can. And at the very least, you'll have a friend and somebody who can give you potentially valuable advice in certain if a difficult situation arises. Have a risk management plan. So things shift and change in China, and you can have, you know, like, I can't remember which American president it was who said that planning's everything, but a plan is nothing. So things change so fast, and sometimes you have the best ideas, and, you know, we sort of follow this Aristotelian notion of time and linear progression. And in China, things are more organic. And I think that they follow a asymmetrical sort of strategic way of approaching things. And so sometimes things just will become stalled out, or things will come up that you hadn't expected. And so I think it's just important in times like that to just breathe deeply and go to your happy place. And then and then wait, because the planets will align. There will come a time where the circumstances, the favorable circumstances, will line up, and you can see the road through. And that's when you just have to grab everybody and just run. Just go. Just go. Be resilient. Keep picking yourself up. You know, it's one thing I've learned is that it's actually a great experience to keep getting knocked down, because it teaches you how to get up and shake it off. And I think Winston Churchill said that success is going from adversity to adversity with a sense of humor. And I think that's important, to develop that sense of humor and to be resilient. Be open to putting the worst foot forward. You know, you don't always have everything that you need, and we exist in a situation where there isn't perfect information. So be willing to take that risk. So, you know, step forward and just, you know, they say in Chinese, like, dang duan bu duan fang qiu xiu qi luan. Like, you know, like, you can't hesitate. Like, you know, I don't know what the English equivalent is, but, like, the city was lost because of some hesitation. Isn't there some kind of expression like that?
I'm a bad Chengyu person.
Rome was lost for I don't know. Want of a toothpick? I don't know. But don't wait for everything to be perfect, and pursue a broad range of partnership options. Partnerships are really important in China. One thing they say in Chinese is ai hu ji hu. If you love the house, you'll love the crow that squawks and comes with it. So accept like these, and, work in networks of strategic networks where, they're very accepted. So you can either be the crow that enters the network, or you can invite a few crows into your network if it's strong enough. And that's something that really works quite well in China. Assume the sale, be bold, but diversify your risk. So move forward, try and be bold, but think about other options. Hold the destination, but be flexible on the route that you take. Assume a winning investment team. By that I mean that your staff are really your biggest resource. So wherever you can, it's important. You can, just by hiring one person who is quite competent, has a good heart, and an excellent network of relationships, you can resolve problems that you never thought before surmountable. So really spend time thinking about the people that you hire. That's quite important. It can work for you or it can work against you. Always be in communication. That's just so important, especially when you're working with issues that are complicated, and also where there are potential language or differences in paradigm. And invest in system development. So one thing is, when looking at the programs that you're implementing and the structures you put in place, try and operationalize as much as you can some of the learning, like these points. One of the things I've been really working on lately is how to take these lessons learned and operationalize them, so that we've captured that knowledge and it doesn't just live with me but stays a part of our organization. And that's it for me. Thank you.
I think that in many ways, Chris, that some of your concluding observations, I think, are also true for Pacific Environment. And yeah, I mean, these organizations, similar but yet very different. And but I think a lot, when he was talking about staff in particular, I was thinking about, some of you've known Wen Bo, and I know that you've got some really great